Basics of fighting skills resounded in his head. Hecarim decided to turn this danger into an opportunity, and made his move. He aimed at the belly, reasoning that the bulk of the shield would create a blind spot in the defense. However, Ains easily swept his weapons aside with the black sword. He saw through it. His eyes followed the wall-like shield as it approached, and he barely evaded the blow by the skin of his teeth, and then a Grieve kicked at him from below. A normal kick was nothing to be afraid of. However, through their brief exchange of arms, he was fully aware that due to Ains' incredible strength, despite having no muscles to speak of, any attack he made could kill him in a single blow. Taking the hit was tantamount to taking a mortal wound. Hecarim frantically rolled away. Without Roberdic's support, it would have been impossible. The vacuum in the kick's passing sliced off several of his hairs, and a chill raced up and down his spine. This way. Imina launched 2 arrows from her bow. Because she had cried out, it was not a sneak attack, and Ains casually avoided it. The arrows flew past him, having missed their mark. To begin with, arrows were not effective on skeleton-type monsters like Ains. She had hoped that he would not bother with evading them and casually take the hits, but it seemed that was not going to happen. The arrows she had loosed had flattened heads, like a spade. They were specially designed magic arrows which would do bludgeoning damage. If they had not been avoided, they should have been able to effectively damage even skeletal opponents. At least, that was how it was supposed to happen, but even if that was not the case, there was nothing to regret. Hecarim took the opportunity to stand up and slightly widen the gap between himself and Ains. Imina's cry had also been to give Hecarim the chance to rise to his feet. Twin blade strike. Ha! The 2 slashes were easily deflected by the single sword. The shock of the parry sent tremors through Hecarim's hands. What a troublesome guy. Is this what happens when you give warrior training to a monster with superhuman abilities? Just how strong is he? The price of repeatedly using his certain kill moves was the rapid draining of mental stamina. His brain felt like it was screaming from his exertions, so Hecarim decided to back away. Of course, Ains would not permit that. As if I would let you escape. Ains charged. That was only to be expected. Backpedaling was slower than forward motion. Just as he was about to catch up to Hecarim, something whistled through the air as it flew past the side of his face. A high-speed arrow came from behind Hecarim's back, hidden by his body. A normal person would not have been able to avoid it. However, against Ains with his superhuman reflexes, it was still not enough. Flash. Lesser strength. A brilliant flare of light burst in front of Ains. Whether he resisted it or not, the spell would blind him for a moment, but it seemed pointless against Ains. All it did was annoy him. Interfering busybodies. Ains clicked his non-existent tongue at Hecarim, who had closed the gap thanks to his augmented strength and dexterity. Reinforce armor. Anti-evil protection. Archie and Roberdic's support spells had solidified Hecarim's defense. Having evaded Hecarim's attack and deflected his swords, Ains was about to riposte once more when another arrow flew into his face. Humph. The casual ease with which Ains evaded the arrow by simply turning his face was befitting of the ruler of the tomb, and of a monstrous warrior. Hecarim used the brief opening made by the support fire to back away, and sweat coursed down his body from the brief, but intense combat. He already knew this, but Ains' Ulgaun was very strong. Human beings could not hope to match his physical abilities. Worse still, he had the technique to make full use of his superhuman strength and speed. His observational skills could see through feints. He had the measure of every member of Foresight. Combined with his resistance to magic, and the enchanted sword and shield he bore, he was everything a warrior wanted to be. But there was a reason they could stand toe-to-toe with a man like this. To be fair, he had been hard-pressed to hold his ground. If he had misread the angle of the falling sword and failed to parry, his swords would have been ruined, and he would probably have suffered a fatal wound. A small mistake in estimating the speed of the black sword would have resulted in him being sliced neatly in half. The fact that all his coin tosses had come up heads was nothing short of luck. Yet, there was an even more important reason beyond this. That reason was teamwork. It was precisely because they had walked the edge of life and death together, and were intimately aware of what each of the others was thinking, that they could move and act like a single organism. This was how the united group foresight could stand against the mightiest individual, Ain's Olgaun. A faint smile lifted the corner of Hecarin's mouth. Until now, Ain's had been untouched. Certainly, he was very strong. But he was not invincible. With this conviction in his heart, he swung his twin swords. Hecarin's sword strike, the fastest his augmented body could produce, was deflected by the round black shield. The arrow flying in was interdicted by the black sword. Archie and Roberdick made use of this opening to enhance Hecarin even further. Ever since Ains had clicked his tongue, his hostility toward them had been rapidly weakening. After considering whether or not to press the attack, Hecarin decided to back down and calm his frenzied breathing. The undead Ains would not get tired no matter how long or how hard he fought, but humans like Hecarin and the others would become exhausted. Dragging the battle out was a bad idea. He had to rest whenever he got the chance. So as I thought, I still couldn't deal a decisive blow. I thought I had the advantage in strength, skills and knowing what you could do, but when I'm actually engaged in battle, I'm still having difficulty. For instance, why haven't I taken any of you down yet? Ains shrugged his shoulders in annoyance. Hecarin, who was watching from opposite Ains, did not feel particularly irritated by his patronizing tone. Truthfully speaking, this was the power of teamwork. Hecarin smiled as though he had been praised. In the midst of all this, the beauty who had been silent up till now finally spoke. Ains-sama. Perhaps you should end this charade here? What? Forgive my rudeness, but I find it hard to believe that you would permit continued freedom to these base knaves, these thieves who dared use the name of the supreme beings to deceive you. Perhaps it is time for the mercy you have granted them to come to an end? Hey, Albedo. If you talk to Ains-sama like that, no aura. That is a good point. Ains shook his head. And that is enough. I have gained sufficient experience from this battle. Truly marvelous. I expected nothing less of the Supreme One who rules me. Ha, is that so? Well, this is certainly cause for celebration. Although I know you're humoring me, praise from a warrior whose skills far exceed my own is still pleasing to me. I would not dream of deceiving you with false praise. Those words came from the bottom of my heart. Is that so? Then thank you. Cositus can evaluate me later, and I still need to hear your opinions on future training sessions like this. Ains nodded several times, looking very satisfied with himself, and then he turned back to Foresight. The air between them had changed, and Hecarin had a bad feeling about it. His instincts that had carried him through many life and death situations were screaming to him, there is great danger here. Now then, that's all for playing around with swords. It is time for a different sort of entertainment. Ains cast aside the sword and shield he was holding, and they vanished before they hit the ground. What? Discarding one's arms was the universal sign of giving up the fight. However, Ains' attitude did not betray even the slightest hint of defeat, that he was in a situation where he was going to surrender. This was not a gesture of capitulation. Unable to figure out what Ains was thinking, Hecarin was filled with confusion. What? At this, Ains smiled. Or rather, he seemed to smile. He slowly spread his arms. It was an action that resembled an angel reaching out to the faithful, or a mother welcoming her child into her embrace, a loving acceptance of what lay before him. You don't get it? Then let me put it in terms you might be able to understand, Ains laughed. I'll play with you, so give me your best shot, humans. The mood had changed. He had forsaken his weapon and his shield. That should have meant he had been weakened. But Hecarin had the feeling that the Ains before him now was more powerful than before. Indeed, it seemed as though his body had physically grown in size before their eyes, so oppressive was his presence. A being that grew stronger when abandoning the sword. When one thought about it, only two answers remained. One would be that he was one of those warrior monks who honed their bodies into living weapons. But if that were the case, his fighting style from earlier, the way he evaded attacks, did not seem polished enough for him to be one of their number. Then, the alternative, he's a magic caster. That cry came from Archie, who had reached the same conclusion Hecarim had. That was it. This was the question at hand. The being before them, Ainslgown, was he a magic caster? It was understandable that they had not considered that earlier. Who could have imagined that any magic caster could have fought on even terms with Hecarim, the party's strongest fighter, and a veteran warrior? Magic casters, especially arcane magic casters, had weaker bodies than warriors. After all, if one had time to train one's body, one could easily spend that time on learning magic. As such, magic casters who could fight on par with warriors were non-existent. That was simple common sense. Yet there were beings who could turn that wisdom on its head. Who could have imagined such a being would be standing in front of them? For that reason, Archie's voice carried the hope that it was untrue, and the desire that her hypothesis would be rejected. Because if it were true, that would mean that Ains was far more confident in his skills as a magic caster than he was as a warrior. What that meant, nobody needed to say out loud. Even casting a few spells could greatly improve battle performance. As Hecarim had been demonstrating, several enhancement spells made a dramatic difference. But if that was the case, did you finally realize it? How foolish you lot are. Well, it's only natural to expect this level of intelligence from you miserable vermin, who track your filth into my friend's Nazarick. However, as long as Archie was around, Hecarim and the others could deny it. Archie. Is this guy a magic caster? No. I'm sure of it. At least, he's not an arcane magic caster. HM? And what is that supposed to mean? I can't sense any magical power from your body. Ah. So you were using divination magic, then? How rude. Ains showed Hecarim and the others his hands. As one might expect of an undead, there was nothing of them but bones. He spread his fingers to show that each of them, on both hands, was wearing a ring. Once I remove this ring, you will understand. I also lent it to my subordinates. Saying that, Ains removed a ring on his right hand. And then Yagi. It was the sound of vomiting. Sticky fluid splattered onto the floor of the arena, and a sour, rancid stench wafted up around Foresight. What did you do? Imina glared at Ains, from where she had rushed over to assist Archie. Ains seemed a little uncomfortable, but still answered in a displeased tone. What on earth is that girl doing? There's a limit to how rude you can be, throwing up when you see someone's face. Everyone, run! Archie was shouting, and tears were leaking from the corner of her eyes. This guy is a Mon Yui. Unable to endure it, Archie threw up again. In that moment, Hecarim understood why she had vomited. Ains had done nothing to her. Rather, she had been unable to withstand the combination of terror and stress caused by seeing the enormous magical power surrounding Ains, and so she had vomited. And that meant we can't beat him. His strength is on a totally different level. Even the word monster can't describe him. Archie began wailing as the tears rolled down her cheeks. No way, no way, no way, Imina tightly hugged Archie to her chest. The girl was violently shaking her head as though she had gone mad. Calm down. Roberdick. Got it. Lion's heart. Under the influence of Roberdick's magic, Archie managed to recover from the panic which had gripped her. Like a newborn deer, she rose unsteadily on shaky legs, using her staff as a crutch. Everyone, we have to flee now. That's not a being humans can beat. It's an unbelievable monster. Understood, Archie? Yeah, I get it. When he removed the ring, the entire world seemed to change. I felt it raise goosebumps all over me. Yes. Powerful wouldn't nearly be enough to describe this monster. The alertness level of the three of them had gone through the roof. They stared at Ains with nerves wound even tighter than before. Theirs was an expression that understood that even an instant's loss of watchfulness would spell their deaths. It looks like they won't let us run. The moment we show them our backs, we die. Although I have the feeling that just averting our eyes would be enough. We need to buy time or we won't make it. Not coming? Of course, Hecarim would not be baited by Ains, who was lazily scratching his skull with one long finger. The enemy's fighting power vastly exceeded that of any being which had ever existed. That meant they could only count on one thing. That was the instant when Ains began casting a spell. A magic caster was most vulnerable when reciting an incantation. If he could cast a spell without incanting it, then it was over for them, but even so, that was a tiny possibility which existed for them. As though drawing a bow taut, Hecarim gathered his strength within himself. Then I will go. Touch of Undeath. What kind of magic is it? Archie. I don't know. I've never heard of it before. The black fog which covered Ains' right hand was an unknown magic which put them all on their guard. Hecarim tensed his legs, ready to dodge at any time. His companions behind him were also wary for an area of effect attack, and began spacing themselves out. Suddenly, Ains began walking towards them. Hecarim's eyes went wide. He had openings all over his amateurish advance. These were not the movements of a skilled warrior. Hecarim knew Ains was trying to bait them into a trap, but he could not read Ains' intentions. Is he trying to use magic for something, or was that spell a close-range type? Or was it a defensive type? Hecarim was familiar with the more famous spells, but Hecarim was not a mage by profession, and he could not understand Ains' intentions. Stay away! Imina's angry cry pierced the air, as did the arrows she launched at Ains. Using a special technique, she had launched 3 arrows at once, but Ains deftly knocked them from the sky with a bony hand. You're in the way. It was a small but cold voice. The red blaze in the empty eye sockets flickered, but it was only Hecarim, who was up front studying Ains' every move, who noticed it. Just as the bad feeling struck, Ains' form vanished. Hecarim turned, trusting his instincts. In his eyes, he saw his companions' shocked faces. However, there was no time to explain. Especially to Imina. Ains was standing behind Imina, slowly reaching his right hand out to her. Imina. She didn't notice. I need to shout, no, useless things like that won't help. As he used a martial art to move at top speed toward Imina, a twinge of confusion ran through Hecarim. Was it wise to protect Imina? Compared to Archie and Roberdick, who could use support spells to enhance people, Imina's usefulness and importance were relatively low. The best way to increase their survival rate was to discard the stumbling blocks at their feet. However, damn it. This was the wrong thing for a leader to do. Even though this was almost equivalent to betraying his comrades, Hecarim did not slow his steps at all. Emotion overruled reason in this matter. He wanted to save Imina. That was all. Suddenly, an image of Imina lying on his bed appeared in his mind's eye. He smiled bitterly to himself, because in a life-and-death situation, all he could think about was her curveless body. Even so, he put even more power into his feet. This was the strength of a man who wanted to protect his woman. Get away! Hecarim's sudden charge created confusion, and thus he made it in time. Before Ains could touch H, he had already knocked Imina out of the way. Ains was deciding which should be his priority, reducing their pain. The small whimpering voice in his head was saying, the man who had appeared in front of him, or the woman who got away. Hey! It's me, dumbass. He followed up his yell with a martial art. First, he used Limit Breaker. There would be a price to pay, but it increased the amount of martial arts he could use at the same time. Next was the technique which made his body feel like something was being broken inside it, dull pain. After that was Physical Boost and a Twin Blade Strike, made under the influence of Iron Fist. His greatest attack was born from these. His twin swords glowed. Hecarim was counting on the fact that Ains would be used to his sword attacks from their earlier exchange, so the sudden change in speed would confuse his senses and make it harder to evade. It was the foreshadowing of a strike which would end the battle in a single blow. Ains did not react to it. I've killed him. Just as he imagined his sword slicing into the defenseless skull, the sensation which traveled up his hands was definitely not the feeling of steel cutting into bone. He's immune to slashing damage? He had had similar experiences during his adventures as a worker. He's immune to both slashing and piercing attacks? What kind of monster is he? As Hecarim tried to retreat in a panic, he felt an icy cold sensation enveloping his forehead. It was Ain's hand. Hecarim felt like he had been clamped in a vice, wanting to escape yet unable to move. Hecarim. Imina. He's immune to slashing. Hecarim tried to shrug off the intense pain and report what he had learned to his colleagues. While he was grasped by the head, he felt his entire body being lifted up. Although he hammered the backs of his swords into Ain's arm, the grip on his head showed no signs of loosening. Wrong. Piercing, slashing or bludgeoning. None of the weak attacks you can muster can do so much as put a scratch on me. That what? The hell, what kind of con game are you running? That's not fair. He's lying. Imina, if that were true, there would be no reason to fight at all. He must have some kind of weakness. I won't fall for it. It's truly sad when you can't even believe the truth that's right in front of you. I would have imagined that you would have realized from the melee battle, and the conversation we had, that you were nothing more than useful test subjects. Did that little skirmish we had give you the hope that you could actually win here? Consider that wishful little dream to be my mercy to you in the hell that is to come. What kind of mercy is that? You piece of shit, you goddamn bastard, let Hecarim go. The arrow arrived at the same time as her voice. However, Ain simply remained still, and the pain in Hecarim's forehead continued unabated. Do you really want to do that? You might hit this man. The pain in his forehead filled Hecarim with fear, the fear that at any moment his head might be crushed by the hand holding it. Although he struggled, Ain's did not shift a millimeter. It was like attacking a steel block. The only thing Hecarim hurt was himself. Did that hurt? Don't worry. I won't kill you just like that. A miserable little thief like you does not deserve that mercy, instead, paralysis. His body was frozen. No, it was not frozen, it had been paralyzed. If all I did was inflict paralysis, then maybe, touch of undeath, was a little wasteful. Hecarim heard the words, but he did not understand them. Imina's bowstring hissed as she sent a continuous stream of projectiles downrange, but the only response was quiet laughter. So how far can you, no, please, struggle as much as you want? That will only deepen your despair. Run away. Hecarim's mouth would not move to make the sounds he wanted. This was an opponent they could not simply evade just by running away. But fighting would be even more foolish. This was especially true given that once the vanguard was taken down, the battle line would collapse. Then, who will be next? Of course, you can all come at once, but that would be too boring, no? Imina turned to look at Hecarim, who was lying on the floor of the Colosseum. He was not dead. But he looked like it. There was no way she could save him from the clutches of the logic-defying monster known as Ain's Ulgaun. But even so, you idiot. Just by common sense, you should have abandoned me. You dummy. She was angry. Idiot, 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 stupid idiot. You moron. Directing abuse to a man who so gallantly risked himself to protect his comrades is only going to upset me, you know. It was a statement that showed a complete lack of understanding for Imina's feelings. Then again, their opponent was a monster. Trying to make him understand human emotions would be impossible. I already know that. I don't deserve such a great leader. She took a breath. But still. You're still an idiot. Running on your emotions like that. What? Don't be confused, Imina thought to herself. She was trying to suppress the feelings of a woman who wanted to save her man. She had to abandon Hecarim and bring this information back. She had to tell the outside world about these ruins, about the fearsome monster which inhabited it, and depending on how things went, they might even need to assemble a punitive force to deal with it. Demon gods. 200 years ago, the demon king that laid waste to the continent Must have been a creature like this. It felt as though the world she was living in had been touched by myths and legends. It clearly could not be like this, but some part of her, deep in her heart, was insisting that this was just a dream. Legends, huh? It sounds so bizarre when you put it that way. It's heroes that ought to be fighting a monster like this. Inspiration struck in a flash. That was it. The ones who battled the demon gods were the 13 heroes. They were heroes. Then, the only one who could fight Ains was also a hero. Give Hecarim back. If we don't return by the stipulated time, the strongest people in the world will force their way into this tomb. If we can return unharmed, you can use us to negotiate. What is this? Lies again. Ains sighed, a silent ha sound. Sweat beaded on Imina's brow. It was genuine. No, I'm not lying. Albedo. Is there anyone who could be considered strong on the surface? There are none. I believe she is just spouting meaningless lies. It's not a lie. The girl behind Imina was shouting. The adamantite-ranked adventurer Mammon from Darkness is there. He's the greatest warrior of them all. He's stronger than you. For the first time, Albedo appeared perturbed. She looked to Ains, panic written on her face, and lowered her head to him. My apologies. There is such a being. Please, forgive me. Yes, I didn't even notice, Albedo. Mammon of Darkness, By the way, forget it, it's not important. He cannot defeat me. He had been acting like a demon king until now, but the way he was slumping his shoulders suggested that he was hiding something. Exactly what he was hiding, nobody could tell. Mammon is strong. Stronger than you. No, those are hardly grounds for negotiation, give it up. Ains waved his hand lazily to dismiss the topic. Now then, shall we begin? The time for idle chatter was over. Archie. Run. Roberdick shouted, and Imina agreed. Yes, run. Look up. This is probably the outside.